The black single-dad janitor placed the CEO's phone on the table. What happened next made her tremble. Before we dive into this incredible story of fate and kindness, take a moment to let us know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. The silence of the 44th floor was a living thing. It pressed in on Marcus Cole, thick and heavy as water, punctuated only by the rhythmic squeak of his cart's wheels and the soft swish of his mop. Outside, the city was a glittering tapestry of light and motion, a world away from the sterile, refrigerated air of Reed International's executive suite. It was past midnight. The last of the ambitious associates and sleepless partners had long since fled, leaving behind the ghosts of their ambition in the scent of stale coffee and expensive perfume. For Marcus, this was the quietest part of his shift, the loneliest. It was when the worry for his daughter, Lily, became a physical ache in his chest. Her cough had been a constant, rattling companion in their tiny apartment for 2 weeks, and the last of the cherry-flavored medicine was gone. The bill for her urgent care visit sat on his kitchen counter, a folded white square of dread he couldn't bear to look at. He pushed his cart into the main boardroom, a cavern of polished mahogany and black leather. The table, a reflective abyss long enough to land a small plane on, gleamed under the recessed lighting. His job was to make it perfect, to erase every fingerprint, every stray crumb, every sign that human beings had conducted their powerful business here. As he wiped down the surface, his cloth snagged on something. He paused. There, lying innocently beside a leather-bound folio, was a smartphone. It was slim, impossibly sleek, and encased in a simple, elegant silver case. He didn't need to pick it up to know it was expensive. More than that, he knew whose it was. He'd seen it countless times in the hand of Ms. Evelyn Reed, the company's CEO, a woman who moved through the building like a storm front, all sharp angles, clipped tones, and an aura of untouchable authority. He had never spoken to her, of course. He was just part of the scenery, as invisible as the air vents humming above. A wave of dizziness washed over him. The phone felt heavy with potential, a dense little brick of possibility. He thought of the pawn shop 2 blocks from his apartment. The money from this device could mean medicine for Lily. It could mean paying the rent that was 3 weeks overdue. It could mean a full grocery cart instead of the careful, painful arithmetic of bread, eggs, and powdered milk. It would be so easy. She would assume it was lost, stolen by one of the hundreds of people who flowed through this building. She would have it replaced by morning, a minor inconvenience. For him, it would be a lifeline. The thought was a serpent, coiling in the pit of his stomach, whispering of relief. But then, an image of Lily's face flashed in his mind, her wide, trusting eyes. The way she'd hold up a drawing for him, her small brow furrowed with concentration, wanting his approval. What kind of man would he be if he taught her that desperation was an excuse for dishonesty? He thought of his late wife, Sarah, and the steadfast moral compass she had lived by. "Dignity is the one thing they can't take from you, Marcus," she used to say, "unless you give it away." He sighed, the sound loud in the cavernous room. His exhaustion was a lead weight on his shoulders. The last bus home had left an hour ago. Waiting meant a 2-hour walk through the biting November wind. But the choice was already made, settled not by logic, but by a deeper, more ingrained sense of self. He would not give his dignity away for the price of a phone. He carefully picked it up, its cool metal a stark contrast to his calloused fingers, and placed it in the center of the gleaming table where she couldn't miss it. He would finish his rounds on this floor and wait. He owed that to Lily, and to the memory of the woman who had taught them both what it meant to be good. An hour later, the elevator doors hissed open, and Evelyn Reed swept back into the boardroom, her face a mask of controlled fury. She didn't seem to notice him at first, her sharp eyes scanning the room, her designer coat swirling around her ankles. She was followed by a flustered assistant who was stammering apologies. "I've retraced every step, Ms. Reed. It has to be here." "It's not just a phone, David. My entire life is on that device," she snapped, her voice echoing in the silent space. Her eyes finally landed on Marcus, who stood quietly by his cart. Her gaze narrowed with immediate suspicion. Have you seen a phone?" Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his gut, the reflexive defensiveness of a man accustomed to being judged on sight. He pushed it down. He met her gaze steadily and gestured with his head toward the table. "It's right there, ma'am. I found it when I was cleaning." Evelyn's eyes darted to the phone, and a visible wave of relief washed over her, quickly replaced by renewed suspicion. "You found it? When?" "About an hour ago," Marcus said, his voice calm and even. She strode to the table, snatching the phone up and checking it as if expecting it to be damaged. "An hour? Why didn't you turn it into security immediately?" "I figured you'd be back for it," he replied simply. "Thought it would be faster if I just waited." She stared at him, her mind clearly struggling to process this. The scenario she had built in her head, of theft and deceit, was crumbling. She saw his worn uniform, the exhaustion etched around his eyes, the quiet stillness in his posture. He wasn't cowering, he wasn't defensive, he was just there. A flicker of something unfamiliar, perhaps shame, crossed her features. She reached into her handbag, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and held it out to him. "Here, for your trouble." Marcus looked at the bill, then back at her face. He gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "No, thank you, ma'am. Just doing my job." He turned, gave the cart's wheel a gentle nudge, and began to push it out of the room, leaving a stunned CEO and her assistant in his wake. The silence he left behind was heavier than the one he had found. The walk home was brutal. A raw wind sliced through his thin jacket, and the 2 miles felt like 20. By the time he let himself into his apartment, his fingers and toes were numb, and the ache in his chest had returned with a vengeance. Lily was asleep on the sofa, a damp cloth on her forehead. A note from their neighbor, Mrs. Gable, said her fever had spiked, but had come down again. On the counter, next to the dreaded medical bill, was a new envelope. It was red, an eviction notice. He had 10 days. He sank into a chair, the weight of it all threatening to crush him. He'd done the right thing, the honorable thing. But honor didn't pay rent. It didn't buy medicine. It didn't keep his daughter warm. The next day at work was worse. His supervisor, a weaselly man named Henderson, pulled him aside. "Heard you had a run-in with Ms. Reed last night," he said, his eyes narrowed. "You need to remember your place, Cole. You find something, you report it. You don't play hero." The implication was clear. He was being watched, his integrity questioned by the very people he had tried to serve. Throughout the day, he felt the stares of his colleagues. The story had spread, twisted into a version where he had been caught trying to steal the phone and had only returned it when the CEO appeared. He was isolated, adrift in a sea of quiet judgment. Back on the 44th floor, Evelyn Reed found herself distracted. The janitor's quiet refusal of her money played over and over in her mind. It was illogical. It was noble. Annoyed by the persistent thought, she idly checked her phone's security features, which included a timeline of its location. She froze. The log showed the phone had been stationary in the boardroom for a full 78 minutes before she had returned. He hadn't just found it. He had waited. For over an hour. He had missed his last bus. He had stayed in a building where he was invisible, guarding a piece of technology worth more than he probably made in a month, all for a woman who had immediately treated him like a criminal. A hot flush of shame crept up her neck. It was a deeply uncomfortable feeling, one she wasn't used to. She clicked the phone off, but the screensaver flared for a second before it went dark. A photo of her, years younger, standing beside a man with a grizzled beard, kind eyes, and a leather jacket covered in patches. Her father. The sight of him sent a familiar pang through her heart, a mix of love and deep, unresolved anger. She hadn't spoken to him in 5 years, not since he'd missed her MBA graduation for some cross-country motorcycle rally. He and his ridiculous club, the Iron Saints. He'd chosen them over her, and she'd never forgiven him. She pushed the memory away, locking it down with the same ruthless efficiency she applied to a hostile takeover. She had a business to run. She had no time for sentiment. 2 days later, Lily's cough deepened into something frightening, a rattling in her small chest that stole her breath. Her fever shot up, and her skin felt clammy and hot. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Marcus. He called in sick to work, an act he knew could cost him his job, and spent the day sponging Lily's forehead and whispering promises that everything would be okay. Promises that tasted like ash in his mouth. By late afternoon, he knew he couldn't wait any longer. She needed a doctor, and he needed money. Swallowing the last of his pride, he took the bus to the Reed International building. He didn't go to his supervisor. He went straight to the 44th floor. He told the executive assistant it was an emergency, a phrase that finally got him past the gatekeeper. He stood before Evelyn Reed's desk, feeling small and out of place, the smell of disinfectant clinging to his clothes. "Ms. Reed," he began, his voice raspy. "I'm sorry to bother you. My daughter is very sick. I need to ask for an advance on my pay." Evelyn looked up from her computer, her expression cool and impatient. "An advance? We don't do that. It's against company policy." "Please," Marcus begged, the word tearing from his throat. "It's an emergency. I wouldn't ask otherwise." She held his gaze for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she gave a slight shake of her head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. Your personal problems are not the company's concern. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting." It was a dismissal, as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. Defeated, Marcus turned and walked away, the door clicking shut behind him like the sound of his last hope dying. He had been a fool to think she would understand. To her, he was just the janitor, nothing more. Evelyn watched him go, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. His desperation had been palpable, raw. She had followed the rules, the cold logic of corporate policy, but the victory felt hollow. Why did his face, filled with such quiet despair, bother her so much? Frustrated with herself, with him, with the entire situation, she slammed her hand on her desk. Her phone, which was lying near the edge, skittered across the polished wood and clattered to the floor. She bent to pick it up, annoyed, and saw that the impact had popped the back of the case loose. Tucked inside, nestled against the battery, was a tiny, folded piece of paper she'd forgotten was even there. It was a photograph, worn and creased from years of being hidden away. She unfolded it carefully. It was the same picture from her lock screen, her and her father. But this one was wider, showing more of the background. Standing just behind her father, smiling softly, was a young woman in nurses, scrubs. A memory, sudden and vivid, struck Evelyn like a physical blow. The accident. Her father's motorcycle crash 15 years ago. He had been laid up for weeks, his leg shattered. This woman, this nurse, had been there. She'd been kind, patient, and had a smile that could light up the sterile hospital room. Her father had called her his guardian angel. Her name was Sarah. The nurse's husband would visit, a young man with tired, kind eyes, a man who looked hauntingly, impossibly, like the janitor who had just left her office. A frantic energy seized Evelyn. This couldn't be a coincidence. She pulled up the company's employee files, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Marcus Cole. Emergency contact. Sarah Cole, deceased. A photo from his employee ID badge stared back at her. It was him, the young man from the hospital, the husband of the nurse who had shown her father such profound kindness. She remembered now. Her father had tried to give Sarah a large sum of money as a thank you, but the nurse had refused, just as her husband had refused the $100 bill. Kindness is its own reward, Sarah had said with that gentle smile. You just pass it on when you can. All these years, her father had searched for that nurse, wanting to repay a debt of honor he felt he still owed. And now, her husband had come to Evelyn for help, and she had turned him away. The full weight of her actions crashed down on her. The shame was suffocating. She grabbed her phone, her hands trembling, and made a call. "Get me Dr. Matthews at Children's Memorial," she commanded. "Tell him it's an emergency. For me." The next hour was a blur of motion. Evelyn didn't delegate. She acted. She had Dr. Matthews, the city's top pediatric pulmonologist, meet Marcus and Lily at the hospital's emergency entrance. She called Marcus's landlord, her voice like steel, and not only paid his back rent, but covered the next 12 months in full. She then called HR. "Henderson, the night shift supervisor," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Fire him, effective immediately. His conduct is a liability to this company's values." Her final call was the hardest. She scrolled through her contacts to a name she hadn't dialed in 5 years. "Dad." He answered on the second ring. "Evelyn?" His voice was gravelly, full of surprise. "Dad," she said, tears choking her words. "I found her. I found Sarah's family, and they're in trouble." 2 hours later, Evelyn Reed walked up the crumbling steps of Marcus Cole's apartment building. She wasn't alone. Behind her, a half-dozen large men in leather vests parked their gleaming motorcycles. They were the Iron Saints. At the front was her father, his face etched with worry. When Marcus opened the door, his eyes wide with confusion at seeing his boss on his doorstep, Evelyn didn't offer excuses. She offered the truth. "Mr. Cole." "Marcus," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "I am so sorry. I was wrong. I was arrogant. And I need to ask for your forgiveness." She explained everything. The photo, the memory of the hospital, of his wife, Sarah. She told him how her father had been looking for his family for 15 years to repay a kindness. Evelyn's father stepped forward, extending a hand to Marcus. "Your wife was a remarkable woman," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She showed me compassion when I was at my lowest. The Iron Saints have a code. We pay our debts. Always." That evening, they didn't just talk. They acted. The bikers, who looked so intimidating on the street, descended on the apartment with tool belts and grocery bags. They fixed a leaky faucet, rewired a faulty light fixture, and filled his empty refrigerator and pantry to overflowing. They didn't treat Marcus like a charity case. They treated him like a brother. The next day, when Marcus went to the hospital to bring Lily home, healthy and vibrant after receiving the best possible care, Evelyn and her father were there. They didn't offer him his old job back. They offered him a new one, managing logistics for the Iron Saints Charitable Foundation, a position with a salary that made his head spin and a purpose that made his heart soar. The transformation was absolute. The community of the corporate tower, who had once viewed him with suspicion, now saw him arriving for meetings with Evelyn Reed, treated as an equal, a man of immense and recognized worth. His vindication was quiet but complete. 6 months later, the sterile silence of the 44th floor was a distant memory. Marcus sat at a long, raucous dinner table in the backyard of a sprawling suburban home. It was Evelyn's father's house. Lily, her laughter bright and clear, was chasing a puppy on the lawn with 2 other children. The air was filled with the smell of barbecue, the rumble of deep voices, and the warm glow of string lights. The Iron Saints, his new family, were all there. Evelyn sat beside him, not as a CEO but as a friend. She had reconnected with her father, and in doing so had rediscovered a part of herself she thought was lost. She had changed her company, implementing new policies that valued people over profit, inspired by a janitor who had reminded her what true wealth looked like. Marcus looked at the scene, at the vibrant tapestry of lives woven together by a single, simple act of kindness performed by his wife years ago. It was a powerful reminder that the goodness you put out into the world never truly disappears. Sometimes, it just takes a long time to find its way back home to you. If this story of how one man's integrity changed everything touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more inspirational stories like this one.